Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And today we've seen The Banshees of Inisherin.
Yes.
That's my non-Irish pronunciation. It's very fluid and lyrical and beautiful in the film. I can't do that.
Yes.
Banshees of Inisherin. It's the latest film written and directed by Martin McDonagh,
Yes.
who was a playwright and then kind of shot to fame as a filmmaker with In Bruges in 2008, which is very fondly remembered.
Yes, I love it.
And then he also did Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri.
Yes.
Which we did twice on the podcast.
Yes, I had real misgivings about that.
And in the middle, he did Seven Psychopaths.
Which I didn't really like.
I wasn't that interested in.
Yeah.
But In Bruges is very fondly remembered. And it was really funny and kind of oddball and interesting. And it starred Brendan Gleeson and Colin Farrell as these two hitmen, kind of going through sort of individual problems that interacted. They're reunited here as a kind of unexpectedly and very suddenly warring couple of friends. There'll be spoilers coming up from right at the start, just so you know. It's set on a fictional island off Ireland called Inisherin, and it's got a kind of Craggy Isle feeling if you ever saw Father Ted. It's incredibly local, small. There's a very small cast. Everyone knows each other, all that kind of thing. It's also set in 1923, so any of the modern technology that might have got there by these days certainly wasn't there at the time. Even though at the start, when it hadn't been established that it was set in the past, I kind of thought, is it set in the modern day? And they just don't have any technology still. And the Father Ted thing even slightly comes into the relationship between the two main characters, because one of them is the kind of Father Dougal, sort of not that bright younger one, which is Colin Farrell, and the other one is the kind of irascible older one, which is Brendan Gleeson. Brendan Gleeson decides one day, right at the start of the film, I don't want to be friends with you anymore. They go to the pub every day, Colin Farrell comes to see him, take him to the pub, no, it's not happening. And we're left wondering why, what's going on, and the film develops this very interesting kind of breaking male friendship. So you said this is the reason you were really interested to see this.
Yes, I'm very interested in male friendships, and I do think that they're underrepresented in cinema. Although people will disagree with me, because of course there's all these buddy films, but I think the exploration of male friendship as a kind of love, the kind of two men can love each other and it not be sexual, which I think this film, finds various ways of telling you that, it's not. Right? I always find that kind of very interesting, because it's true that, these men have clearly loved each other at some point. You get the feeling that actually they continue to do so, right? It's just that Colm, the Brendan Gleeson character, has had this, a consciousness of the fact that he's got very little time, and, that he's wasting all this time with this guy who he finds actually dull, and he's going to put his time to better use by writing his music, that's all, right? But the withdrawal of love has such an impact on the Colin Farrell character, that he disbelieves it. So actually, I think the whole first half of the film is him trying to understand why he's not loved anymore. And actually, I thought that this really resonates, because this almost like resonates, across gender. You often find when people are dumped, be it in friendship or in love, that there is like this real bewilderment. It's almost people can't imagine it of themselves. What have I done? And then you realize, well, I haven't done anything. And so somebody has just stopped loving you, and people have real trouble grasping that. That it is so unimaginable. You always feel that you have to have done something that, were you drunk? Did you say something you don't remember? Did you do something horrible that you didn't think was horrible? No, it's just somebody stopped loving you, that's all, right? But
all the questions that Colin Farrell asks in this film,
yes.
What have I done? What is it? And the answer is nothing. Actually, one of the interesting parts early on for me was when Brendan Gleeson's character says, I've changed.
Yes.
That was so interesting. Like, normally that's not, people don't see that about themselves. They see the other person's a dick all of a sudden. They seem to think, no one actually thinks I might be the reason for something.
I think people do. I think, the interesting thing about is that, the whole film is about relationships. And of course, it is between men. But I think they can be extrapolated to almost any kind of relationships. I think this is the film's worth, or its value to me. That it's illuminating on that, because of course people change, and people will often say this: my marriage broke up because we went in different directions, or because I changed, or because they changed, right? Like, kind of. I think those are questions that are actually often explored, in intimate, socially prescribed relationships. They're almost never explored, I think, in terms of relationships, friendships between men. Yeah, so I think, the film does it beautifully, and I found it so moving, because it almost like Colin Farrell is so great, because he's playing someone who's not very bright, and who's aware that he's not very bright, but who's very kind, and he just can't wrap his head around this change, right? And, he thinks there's something with him, or that he's got to do something different, and even when Brendan Gleeson loses a finger, the message doesn't come across. Even when he loses the 5 fingers, you get the feeling that he still can't get, it hasn't sunk in, that actually this guy just doesn't want to spend the time with him, and it has nothing to do with him. Yeah.
One of the things that the film is talking about very consciously, I think, is depression. It's kind of brought up almost as a joke between Colin Farrell's character, Pádraic, and his sister. I mean, they're not sharing a joke, but it's brought up in a jokey way in the film's terms. They say, "Oh, yeah, I think he might be depressed," and it's comic that they would be kind of diagnosing him, sort of in the background, sort of thing. But a couple of scenes where Colm goes to confessional, both times, the priest asks him, "How's the despair?" So it's not new. It's been going on for a while, and that's a real question. That's something you only share in confessional, right? And so the film is taking it seriously, even if the characters don't really know what they're talking about. Like, it's something that Colm really feels, and it really, I think, makes sense of why you would do something as insane as cut your finger off, an important finger, to make a point. I mean, he's searching for something more, and he has this thing about, as you said, we have very little time. I have very little time left, and I want to leave something behind. Everyone there's only one person that we see on this whole island has a child, and it's the police officer who beats his child every day
and who fiddles with him.
Yeah, so like this
fiddles with him, and then he beats him up out of his own guilt for having done.
This is a very small, grey, lonely, isolated island where almost no one is leaving anything, and he really feels that. But I think it has to be combined with this depression to make it kind of active, to spur him. I mean, it's a funny thing. Depression normally is something that keeps you indoors and stops you from doing things, something you have to fight in that sense. And I think here it's being shown in a way that I don't think is necessarily unrealistic, though people who have more experience of it may disagree with that, as something that's spurring him to change, something that's actually causing him to fight. His personality reacts to it differently.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the film mentions it as depression. Obviously, it was known by other names before, melancholia, terms like that. And I don't think it has anything to do with being indoors or being outdoors. I mean, kind of, suicides are quite common in small agricultural villages where people live their whole lives outdoors. So I think that's a modern perception of looking at it. Yeah. I liked the whole small town thing very much. The enclosedness, the gossip, the lack of things to do, also the familiarity. I thought one of the film's failings was that it didn't give you enough texture, right? So, Brendan Gleeson is 70 in the film, and the Colin Farrell character must be 50, right? Why did they never marry? What were their, their families? Did they have, failed love affairs? Did they have children elsewhere? Of course, they could just be, not married for many reasons. But I thought a film that was more textured visually would have given you that information visually without necessarily having to speak it. Whereas I think here in this film, all the information that you're getting is largely through the dialogue. Of course, the landscape is very beautiful and it creates its own mood and so on, and it's not kind of unaware of filmmaking. There's that, moments where where the camera moves, or where you go into close-ups and so on. So I'm not denying there's a level of competence there, but I do think that a better film director would have textured in audiovisually this background to these characters that is not quite there.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think the one bit of sort of set design, at least, that does anything kind of informative in that respect is that in Colm's house, it's his house is decorated with art or masks, these kind of things, but cultural artifacts and things like that, basically showing what we already have got out of dialogue, which is that he's an artistic person. That's not really adding much.
There is that puppet that seems to be hanging from a noose.
Oh yeah.
But I thought that was just like underlining.
Was it a horse thing? Was it?
There was something
because that might be a foreshadowing.
No, there was something. There was maybe a mask or something, and then hanging from it was a person, like a puppet.
Was it?
Yeah.
Because I remember Colin Farrell playing when he goes to his house at the start. He just plays a little bit with what I thought was a horse puppet hanging.
Oh yeah, that was something else. I'm thinking. Right. I think it was like a puppet with a beak, maybe.
Okay.
From
the plague times.
From the plague, something like that. Yeah. I could be misremembering, but I thought it was something like that. And I didn't get the character of the witch at all, or not the witch, but what I mean, the old lady,
the old lady
who's a seer, and who everybody dislikes and keeps away from because they're attributing powers of sight to her.
Yeah, I wonder whether there's some cultural context that we're missing with her, because I felt the same thing. I kind of she's a bit of an oddball kind of, which is not to say she's out of place exactly. Like, she does kind of make sense, but there was something that felt like it needed a little more explanation about her or context.
Yes.
She's hanging around portending doom in all sorts of specific ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I didn't quite know what to make of her, although I did like the interplay between the characters and her. And she's kind of quite aware of things she's saying coming across as mean, and she seems to kind of relish in it too. She says at one point, she said, I think he says that's just mean or something, and she says, no, I just want to be accurate. But she says it in this way that's like, yeah, I kind of like being mean too. Kind of like that. The film's comic tone is interesting because Martin McDonagh has a reputation for the comedy in his films. I would say this, of the 4 that I've seen, well, actually all his 4 films, I would say this is the most straightforwardly dramatic, but there is lots of comedy in it. But it's like it's the most. The thing about things like In Bruges in particular is that the comic moments, or scenes would be built for the comic moment, and they would be dramatic too, perhaps, but they would be built for the laugh. Here, the laugh just punctuates something. It's a line, but it doesn't deflate it in the way that it would in the other film. Like, you got to the point of the scene, which was the laugh. Here, the laugh is just in the middle of the scene. The scene continues to be dramatic. Do you see what I mean?
Yes. One of the things that I missed, and I think it's because my ear for, Irish pronunciation is not all it could be. I think, I understood almost all of it, but actually an important bit that I missed was one of the last lines, when they're on the beach and they're having that exchange, and so I have no sense of what the film's ending is, except they're each moving in a different direction, but I didn't catch the dialogue.
Well, the dialogue right at the end, if that's what you missed, was Brendan Gleeson saying, "Thanks for looking after my dog."
Yes.
And he says that. "Anytime."
Yes.
And I think those were the last lines.
But before that, though.
Right.
I mean, I was thinking, is there a reconciliation here? Are they going to keep attacking each other?
It was funny. There was a kind of attempt one. It is an interesting ending because Colin Farrell's character has kind of been turned nasty.
Yes.
And he's burnt down the house and so on, and thinks, or at least knowingly has burnt down the house with Brendan Gleeson's character inside, not knowing that he would later leave the house and live. So he's been turned seriously nasty. And it's interesting that, the thing about cutting off the fingers, if you speak to me, if you bother me, I'm going to cut off fingers. He turns that ultimatum round. He becomes that character, right? He's saying, okay, tomorrow at 2:00 I'm burning down your house no matter what. He gets to set the ultimatum now. And then right on the beach there is an attempt from Colm, the Brendan Gleeson character, at reconciliation, I think, he said, because the Civil War's going on, it's 1923, the Civil War's going on, they can hear the guns have stopped, and he mentions it, and it's an attempt at small talk. The thing he said the whole film through is, I'm sick and tired of your small talk, you spent 2 hours telling me about your horse's shit the other day. He said, I'm sick of it, I've got to do something better with my life. Now he's saying, oh, let's chat about the thing. And Colin Farrell turns it down. He says, I can't remember what he says, but it's along the lines of, I don't care, I'm not interested, whatever it was.
Yes.
He makes it clear that he's not playing. So it's like he realises, Brendan Gleeson, he's met his match, or he feels like whatever kind of masculine explosion has happened. Because even though the film is quite dour and subdued, you've still had 5 fingers cut off and a house burned down. It's kind of, there's violence in this.
Sure.
And like after this, it's like he's thinking, it's done now, right? Maybe we can move. Maybe I've discovered something about my former friend. Maybe I can make him my friend again. And it's, like I say, sort of turned down, and he leaves. But then there is this final thing of, you looked after my dog, and any time, and he can't help but say any time almost. It's like, like it's a reflex.
Yes.
So that's where the film kind of hangs, right? The possibility of reconciliation.
Yes. So the possibility of reconciliation is shut down.
Well, it is, but then I think that final line, any time, looking after the dog, just reopens it slightly. Like maybe there's room.
But they're walking in opposite directions.
They are. It's certainly not. It's not for definite that they'll reconcile, but they could. I think it's just giving you a 1%, just something to hang your hopes on.
Except then there's also the death of the young man.
Yeah, the Barry Keoghan character.
Yes,
the son of the police officer,
who we're kind of told is the only person in the whole island dimmer than the Colin Farrell character.
Yeah.
Right, and who's very sweet and in many ways also very intelligent. Yeah, like he's emotionally intelligent. He's very aware of what's happening. Right, and that kind of is on the edge of the narrative as well. Right, so is it because he feels unloved? Yeah, his father's fiddling with him and beating him up. He declares himself to the sister, and of course, she kind of laughs at him in a sweet way, but she's laughing at him. Right?
I like that. I thought it was a nervous laugh. Like, I didn't think she was laughing at him, but she is letting him down.
Yeah.
She has to.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
No, I get that. It's a wonderful scene.
Yeah.
But you wonder if the suicide is a result of all of it. And then on top of that, he discovers that Pádraic isn't as nice
as he
thought, that he's become a not nice person. So,
and it's the thing that he really liked about him.
Yes, right. And actually, if you see the whole film about that, maybe kind of there's something here about masculinity and kind of, because the whole narrative is not just about the dissolution of this friendship. The dissolution of the friendship happens at the beginning. It's about what that dissolution, the effect that dissolution has on the Colin Farrell character, which is to make him a not nice person.
Yeah. It's like he has to be convinced to be a not nice person, because he tries his best.
Yes.
And it's a natural response to him to be nice.
Yes.
And to try and reconcile, and to try and see the best.
Yes.
At first he thinks it's an April Fool's joke.
Yes.
And it takes him a long time. It takes him 5 fingers to realise.
Well, no, it takes him the death of his own donkey. It takes.
Yes, yeah.
It takes him losing something he loves.
Yes.
To actually get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So because even the 5 fingers aren't enough. He's always looking. It can't be. Right, and it's only when his, the donkey that he loves more than anybody in the world dies as a result of,
an accidental result.
Yeah.
Well, I think that came shortly afterwards, but yeah, it is definitely that. The 5 fingers are thrown at his door, and I don't think he sees Brendan Gleeson between that and seeing his donkey. I don't remember. It seemed quite short, but it's definitely the donkey dying that changes him.
Yes. He definitely is aware that the Brendan Gleeson character has chopped off the rest of his fingers before the donkey dies.
Yeah. Well,
so
they passed him on the road, didn't they?
Yeah.
Brendan Gleeson's walking away and they're walking up.
That's right.
And then,
Yeah, so you have a sense of registering the effect of that on him.
Yes, yeah.
And it's not until his donkey dies that,
that was a good bit
change.
of filmmaking, actually.
Yeah.
Now, mentioning that kind of the camera work, because we see Brendan Gleeson go to the house and throw the fingers one at a time. It's fish. You were wincing every time the fingers came up. And then we see him walk away, and then there's a drone shot of the path leading up to that house, and we see Brendan Gleeson on the one end of it walking down, and we see Pádraic and his sister walking up, and just this snatch of a shot tells you, at least it worked for me, there's going to be a confrontation. So what's going to happen when these two cross paths in 5 seconds time? I thought that was really smart bit of filmmaking. I
mean, I don't want to put the film down in that respect, because I said, there were things that really worked visually for me. The whole look of the island, the way that it was lit, the interiors with only outside light coming in and these very tiny windows. So it creates the sense of, people who have to live indoors because of the weather, but actually where indoor living is very uncomfortable. I liked all of that.
But it's a bit thin.
Yeah.
I don't think that's ever been Martin McDonagh's strongest sense visually.
No, it isn't. And I think I was very moved by the film. I really love it. Actually. Yeah, I do.
I mean, I must say that I did find myself getting bored at points and thinking this is a slow. It's quite slow, and it's kind of a slow burner. And I do understand why. But I was slightly tuning out here and there. But whenever I did, there would normally be a funny line of dialogue that would perk me back up. So it worked eventually. But I did kind of think, wouldn't this make a better short subject?
No, I didn't feel that. I was really involved, through it all, actually. And I was very much involved emotionally. The laughs were a kind of a bonus, really. I was completely fascinated by Colin Farrell's face.
Yeah?
Yeah. It's very difficult to play nice, and it's very difficult to play dumb, right? I mean, I remember John Huston discussing, what's the film? Something's on, Prizzi's Honor, and the casting of Jack Nicholson. And, Jack Nicholson had to convince him that he could play dumb. Yeah, he could play someone not intelligent because, it's very difficult to do, particularly for intelligent actors, right? And I thought Colin Farrell was just wonderful, I don't know how many different looks of surprise and, how not getting something is so interesting. You see his face and you register almost all his expressions, what he's thinking, and how he's trying to make sense of this information that he doesn't quite get, and then he'll end up with a question, and the way that he asks it with a tilt, it's almost I can't believe it's happening. I thought he was riveting in a really tremendously difficult part, because it's hard to make dim and nice attractive, right? Yeah, or exciting, or
he's actually heartbreaking right from the start.
He's wonderful.
He's so hurt and he's so transparent about it. You feel it.
He's so moving, and the film is kind of a difficult film because it begins on a note of loss, right? And then the whole film is about this very nice, very dim person losing more and more and more as he's transformed from a really lovely guy to a not so lovely one, right? Someone who begins to do mean things. So, that's the narrative arc of the So that's kind of quite a difficult thing to pull off, and I think, I loved it. Yeah,
it's also a film. If we say it more from the Colm character side, it's also a film about fear of being forgotten, ambition, things like this, pride. Actually, I mean, and at one point,
all his sins that he talks about.
Yeah, in one of those confessionals, he mentions he's done a bit of pride. But I've never seen that as a sin, he says.
Yes. And yet it is one of the 7 deadly ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that he definitely has, and that's kind of informs a lot of his character in this film. And it's like kind of overnight he's let pride take him over. You know, and he has that confrontation in the pub where he talks about everyone here is going to be forgotten. I want to do something that won't be forgotten. There's pride in that. There's also the thing about Siobhan, the sister, having applied for this job at a library on the mainland, as we learn from the fact she's got a job offer and she takes it. So, you know, she has her ambition to be on. She's not kind of masculine and proud about it. In fact, she keeps it fairly quiet, you know, until time is to leave. I mean, I get a sense from her it's a question of not wanting to hurt her brother, because he loves her and they live together, and you know it's all that.
Yes, and they're all the other has really.
But she you know, there's a similarity there. She has her ambition. She obviously handles it very differently, and yeah, I suppose more healthily.
But also, you get the sense that the place is a very beautiful place, but actually, it's also oppressive to the spirit. Yeah, or it only permits a very particular type of narrow life.
Yeah.
You know, so you know, for her, getting out is essential to, you know, being free or having options. And actually, you do also get a sense that it's the place and the isolation and the smallness of the town and the smallness of the mentalities, you know, and the education and so on, that are actually what are also grinding down these two people.
Yeah, well, it's about the satisfaction of living there, and most people on this island are satisfied with it. Colin Farrell drinks every day in the pub at 2:00, chats shit all night, goes home, next day does the same thing. In between, he's milking his cows and looking after his donkey and all that. And it's a satisfied life of no ambition, and it is the island that kind of keeps it. I was interested in the student characters, the music students who come and play with Brendan Gleeson, because I just kind of thought, where do they come from? They can't be from the island. They must have travelled there. It didn't make sense to me that they were from
they
the
obviously travelled from the mainland, because you see that the mainland is just across the bay.
Yeah.
So the explosions are happening. So
so like they're these kind of, and the mainland to Siobhan represents a future ambition, improvement. So
it's a war ending and things happening.
So she goes there, and Brendan Gleeson brings them to him, and they're both kind of expressing their ambition through contact with the mainland. Maybe,
but you think, well, what has the thing is, you have no sense of what Brendan Gleeson's life has been like. And I think that is a problem with the narrative. I think also, but to a lesser extent, Colin Farrell's, because you need to know more about the background of that person or the history of that person to know why he's now so dissatisfied and has this burning ambition to create art. Also, you don't understand why, he can't create art and be nicer to, Pádraic. I mean, so I think kind of, I suppose it's one of those things that the more you think about it, kind of the less satisfying it becomes, actually. The thing about cutting off your fingers if he speaks to you again, it feels like a conceit, like a literary conceit.
Yeah.
I don't quite get why someone would harm their own life so much just to not speak to someone they've clearly spent the last 30 years speaking to, right? So what drove him to that point? It can't be answered only by, I want to write music now.
Well, that's why I said earlier on, I said that the depression, the idea that he is genuinely depressed in the way that he could diagnose, that makes sense of that to me, because up till then it is a conceit. And actually, we saw in the trailer, they bring up this five fingers thing, and I was thinking, is that going to be a joke, or is it the actual thrust of the film? It turns out it's a large part of the thrust of the film. It's really important to the film. But I do think that the film invoking, depression and, as it's put more seriously, despair, does make sense that to me. I think it gives you a way to think of Colm's mental state.
To me, it doesn't.
In a way, what it did to me.
Yeah. Because, I think for me, depression
leads to suicide. It can definitely lead to cutting off fingers.
No, but that's different. Suicide is ending all pain. Kind of cutting off your finger is for 30 years more of pain, or, until you die. And then cutting off the others is even more pain and even more obstacles. How are you going to tie your shoelaces? So I think to me it's not justified by depression, because actually depression often manifests itself as a lack of energy to do anything, so, suicide, yes, that kind of action, I don't get.
Okay. It makes it make more sense to me, but I do agree there's still an element of conceit here that it's the film where the guy cuts his fingers off to spite his friend.
Yeah.
There's definitely that to it.
Yes. Now, I went along with it. It's not something that prevented or blocked my involvement in the film, but just thinking aloud, there are all of these things that end up being unsatisfying as you think about it.
Yeah. Thinking about it, it kind of constitutes a work of myth. So the fingers thing is a conceit, definitely, but it's a kind of thing in the classics. Some character would have cut off his fingers to spite his old friend. It's that kind of thing. It has that, like Orpheus going into the underworld. Maybe we're not meant to really believe this happened. Did the Greeks ever believe that really happened? But the story lasts.
It does feel mythic, right? In the sense that it's the kind of thing you expect of a medieval thing. If you don't do this, we'll cut one of your fingers and kill your daughter or something, right? So, yeah. But the thing is that I think even in myth, you associate it as an external punishment, not as internal one. It's not out of spite. If you talk to me, I will cut off my finger. Though maybe, there are things like that, yeah. I suppose, I forget what it is, but there is one where they say, if you do this, I will cut off my own eyes or something, or I will kill my children. Yeah. Yeah, kind of. Actually, Greek myth has that.
Yeah, well, what's his face plucked his own eyes out because he slept with his mother. Oedipus, yeah, because he slept with his mother. It does. I think. I suppose it's funny to think of it in that way, just because you always think of myths as thousands of years old and not having been written yesterday.
Yes, of course, a lot of myths have been kind of written yesterday. Superman.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, which does function as myth. So I think that's a very interesting thing. I think my problem is one of interpretation, in the sense that I don't, so you think that it's alluding to something, yeah, but I don't quite get the reference, yeah. I think that it's also true of, the old lady. She's obviously fulfilling some kind of function, as in kind of Greek tragedy or, something like that. Yeah. But I just don't get what that is. I don't have the frame of reference, really.
Yeah.
But you get the sense that she's meaning more than just a mad old lady who, threatens,
Yeah. But I think, in a sense of the finger thing, meaning more. I mean, it's the thing that the film is setting up to hang this exploration of male friendship and pride and anger and all the rest of it on. It's the thing that activates all that, lets it be discussed.
Yeah, so you're saying it as a structural thing. I think it can be both. I think it can be something that's both structural and allegorical. Yeah. But obviously, what it allegorizes exactly escapes me. But you just have a suspicion that it does. And actually, it doesn't impede the enjoyment of the film.
No.
Because I think, that old lady, if she means something else, even better, or if she can be read as something else, makes the film richer or whatever. But actually, if she just functions as this mad old lady, who is like a village reference, who's an outsider and, who's slightly vilified and also slightly threatening, that is a kind of a stereotype as well. It's a character in fiction, and it works very well within those parameters, on a surface level. So I didn't have any problem with that. Though, I'd be curious to read somebody who's better versed in, classic tragedy. If they see something in the film that I don't.
Yes, so there'll be people who've got something very specific out of those sorts of things that we haven't. Yeah. That'll be interesting. Yeah.
Anyway, this kind of not restores my faith in the director, but I'm glad to like him again, right? Because I think there was something about Three Billboards, which people are still insisting is this great work, which I thought, the whole racial elements and so on were really quite culturally insensitive and dodgy. Yeah.
Well, culturally kind of unknowing as well. Like,
exactly.
The thing is that you definitely also thought the film had greatness in it, and you found some of it kind of Shakespearean. So it's not kind of discount it or give the kind of wrong impression.
No, of course.
But that element definitely had this feeling of you don't know the place you're making a film about. Here, you definitely seem to. Martin McDonagh
up to a point.
Yeah.
Actually. Because he is someone who grew up in London.
Yeah.
So I do think that also there's a sense in which his understanding of small town Irish life, is also an outsider's one.
Yeah, I kind of think so too, and that's why I think actually, it may have seemed kind of reductive, the Father Ted sort of similarities I was drawing, but I think they're kind of there. And the thing is, Father Ted is, although it's made by full on, as it were, quote unquote Irish people, with an understanding of what that place is like. It's a sitcom. And it's also kind of reductive in a sense for British audiences, who don't know fuck all about Ireland. Martin McDonagh. I don't want to speak too much about how much Martin McDonagh, he grew up in London, as you say, but his parents are Irish, and what his kind of background is.
I think he was born and grew up in London. He's a Londoner.
Yeah.
Right. I think his parents then retired back to Ireland, to a small town.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm not saying he doesn't have a clue about it. I'm just saying he's got an outsider's look on it.
It still kind of feels...
And it feels that way. It really does. Yeah,
But it feels like he knows more about that than he does about Missouri.
That's for sure. That is for sure.
The last thing is that I've seen loads of people talking about the donkey, and they're saying the donkey steals every scene he's in. I don't think so. No. The donkey's just a donkey. Actually... Barry Keoghan steals every scene he's in. He's wonderful, I think.
I think he's wonderful.
It's funny, I was criticising an actor in Smile the other day for having kind of too much going on facially, like too many tics and things. Actually, Barry Keoghan is doing a lot of that here, but it really works for me. I think it seems to come from somewhere very embodied within his character, that there's something nervous and active about him, and he's also young as well. He's younger than everyone else we see, and there's something about that is kind of, there's a kind of idiot vitality that's expressed through the way he behaves. But yes. I think he's really wonderful, and as you were saying, kind of very open and all that. And that scene between him and Siobhan on that might be one of my favourite scenes in the film. It was really beautifully played.
It is,
and so kind of incidental to everything else. Yes. Obviously not to his story, but
I think all the actors are wonderful actually, and they're beautifully cast. I love the look of the priest, because there's something seedy and mean and slightly unsalubrious about his look. It's kind of like wonderful casting. It
makes sense when he leaves the confessional having an argument, like in front of everyone. It's lovely.
Yeah. Anyway, I actually highly recommend it. I had a lovely time watching it. I think it's a serious film about a serious issue, very stylishly kind of evoked in a way that it just imbues everything with sadness. A very melancholy kind of film, but kind of very human and with quite a bit of humor. So I highly recommend.
Good.
All right. Well, thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. So the other thing I thought was, when he sets the house on fire, and the fire, certainly on the roof, is very clearly CG. Like they haven't got good CG fire yet, or at least they didn't in this film. But then you think it is better than setting a house on fire, like the environment.